All right, guys, this is a look at lesson 2 that was presented in class on Monday, November 9th. We started with our opening. We reviewed highlights from chapters 1 through 3 that we hit last Friday. We read excerpts from chapters 4 and 5. You are responsible for both of those. And then we worked on the first 2 rows of the analyze character note catcher. So let's take a look at the opening. In the opening, we found our learning targets. I can find the gist of chapters 4 and 5 of 2 rows, and I can analyze how Cal responds to and changes due to the events in chapters 4 and 5. Our entrance ticket gave us an excerpt from the afterword, and the afterword is at the back of the book, and it provides additional information, and for this one, it is some more historical context for us. 2 Roads takes place at a tumultuous time in American history. While it is first and foremost a story about a young man trying to understand what path he must travel, its backdrop is 1932, when this nation was deep in the Great Depression. It was a period when, after the stock market crash of 1929, average family income dropped by 40%. There were over 2 million homeless people of every social class and background living in shanty towns called Hoovervilles and hopping freight trains as hobos. Among those hobos were no fewer than 250,000 teenagers whose story was dramatically chronicled in 1997 PBS documentary called Riding the Rails. The life of the hobo, including hopping freight trains and living temporarily in shanty towns near the tracks called jungles, might be said to have begun a century and a half ago after the Civil War. That was when large numbers of out-of-work men, most of them veterans, used those trains as the fastest way to go, often west, in search of jobs. Then we get one more paragraph where we are reminded that hobos are essentially migrant workers, impoverished homeless people who readily accept employment and pride themselves on being honest. Tramps who work only when forced to, and bums who refuse to work at all are looked down upon by real hobos. We talked about how this information was relevant to this text as we have a better understanding of what was happening in that time period with the Great Depression. And again, some information about shanties and hobos and the difference between hobos and tramps and bums. We then got into the book and we read an excerpt from chapter 4 where we find out that Cal's mom has passed and that that Pop wants to go to the march on Washington, and Cal does not get to go. He's worried about Cal's safety, so Cal is going to go to Indian school. And then in chapter 5, Pop is telling Cal about Indian school, and then at the end, we find out that where Pop says, well, first, let's see. Cal asked, Jim Thorpe was Creek? No, Pop says, speaking real slow. I was. So we find out that Cal and Pop are both Creek Indian, which is earth-shattering news to Cal. So then everyone made a copy of this analyzed character note catcher that looks like this. We completed the first 2 rows together. That in chapter 4, the challenge Cal faces is Cal learns that Pop is going to DC, but Cal is going to Indian school. Cal is confused and asks lots of questions to himself, and Cal is feeling nervous about not being with Pop and not understanding. And then in chapter 5, Cal learns that he and Pop are both Creek Indian. Again, Cal feels confused and very uncertain. And then Cal is questioning his identity. We will come back to this note catcher in future chapters. Next one is chapter 9, but we want to make sure that we have the first 2 rows for chapters 4 and 5 completed. And then finally, we are going to do a gist and vocab assignment for chapters 4 and 5. So when we have an assignment with combined chapters, you need to provide me with a gist for all the chapters included to get full credit. So 2 gists, chapters 4 and 5, and then choose one of the words defying, savage, subdued, or plight to use correctly in a sentence. And we will be moving on to lesson 3 tomorrow.